Hi everyone, and welcome to Bluebeam Revu. I'm Ariel with Digital Drafting Systems, and today we're going to be discussing markups and measurements with Revu. We can access our markups in three different ways. We can go up here to the Tools drop-down menu, under Markup, and we see a list of all of our available markups. We can also use these keyboard shortcuts right next to each markup to access them in the drawing space directly. So if I wanted to make a text box without having to go through the menu, I could just press the T button. And now I am making a text box very easily. The third way of accessing markups, which gives us even more options, is the tool chest found right here on the left side. Our tool chest comes with some predefined markups for architects, contractors, and engineers, and we see our recent markups and our custom markups under My Tools. You can make a new category of markups by going to Manage Toolsets right here, and you can click on Add. Also, if you like your tools and you'd like everybody in your office to use the same tools, and vice versa, you can always import tools from your colleagues or click on the tools that you like and click on Export. Now you can share those tools with your colleagues very easily. I've already added two markups to the My Tools group, and I'm going to show you two different ways of recreating these markups. As you can see, the icons in My Tools look very similar to the markups that are on the screen, and when I click on them, I'm making a carbon copy of those markups. But let's say I wanted to maintain the same properties as the markup, but input different data into it. All you need to do is double click on the markup itself, and now you can see that the icon has changed. It doesn't have the same exact icon, it shows some generic text. And on screen, I can now write different info using the same colors, same properties, same subjects, and we can see our properties here in the upper right. So it's very important to know the difference between the two kinds of icons in the tool chest. Here's a Cloud Plus tool. Carbon copy can be made, or if I double click on it, now I can make a new cloud with a different size, and I can put its leader anywhere I'd like. There are many different kinds of markups. We can go back to our markups list up here and see them. We can make a typewriter markup, which is basically text without a text box. We can press enter to start a new line. And the typewriter tool is very useful for writing text quickly. We can create notes. Notes are extremely useful because we can put pages upon paragraphs upon essays of text in this little note box. And once we're done, the only space that's taken up is this little icon here. So this icon can house tons of information. We can also create simple callouts. Our cursor, when we click, will begin with the arrow of the callout, and then we can move outward and place the actual text right here. And you'll notice that every time I select a markup, special properties appear right here under our toolbars. So if I click on this markup, you'll see that I can modify it in a number of ways similar to other word processing programs. Similar functions can also be found under the Properties pane right here on the right. We can actually change the subject of this markup, which allows us to categorize it down here in our markups list. I'm going to be going into more detail about the markups list in a future video. And we can modify all kinds of information, including its color, font, size, etc. Back to our markup tools, we can use the pen, highlight, and eraser tool to create some very quick lines. We can also make a line, which is perfectly straight, an arrow, which begins a little differently from the callout. It actually begins with the end point of the arrow and then the actual beginning pointer of the arrow at the end right there. Bluebeam Revu is very unique in that it's the only PDF program that can create arcs. We can just click on the origin and click on the destination, and now we have a perfect arc. We can then click on the markup, hold and drag it to move it, and you'll see that there's all of these little circles, these grips on the markup itself. The two grips on the endpoints of the arc allow us to extend and retract the arc. Each grip at the corners allows us to resize the arc. I can stretch it, but if I wanted to actually scale the arc without stretching it, I can hold the Shift key, and this allows me to move my arc in and out and change its size perfectly. This last grip up here is the rotate grip, and when I click on it, you'll see that my cursor is changing every time I move over it. Let's click on it, and as I move, I can change my rotation at increments of 15 degrees. So let's rotate this 90 degrees. Perfect. We also have access to polylines, dimensions, rectangles, ellipses, and polygons, a regular cloud in the Cloud Plus tool, which I showed you previously, and we can insert images which act very similarly to markups. Let's put this typical wall detail in the drawing. Let's click and place its origin. Let's move and drag down to the bottom right to resize it. And now, when I let go, my image is placed. I can now move it anywhere I want. Let's say that I didn't want to modify this image any longer, and I wanted it to remain where it was, and I didn't want to accidentally click on it either. All I have to do is click on the image, right-click, and click on Flatten. Flattening this image allows it to become part of the drawing. You can see that these lines made in a CAD program are part of the drawing, and I cannot highlight them or select them. This image is now very similar to those lines. Not only can we flatten images, but we can flatten any of our markups as well. I can right-click on this markup and flatten it. You'll know that a markup can't be selected if the cursor doesn't change when you mouse over it. So this markup can be selected because my cursor is changing to an arrow with the cardinal directions instead of the typical hand with a magnifying glass. Once you flatten a markup, you can't modify it. So let's undo what we've done so that we can modify these. And what's important is when you flatten, you'll want to flatten these markups when you sign or certify your documents. That's a great time to flatten. But before then, it is highly recommended not to flatten your markups until you're absolutely ready. Some markups you can't just press the delete button over them, so in this case we're going to right-click on the image and delete. And right-clicking over a lot of our markups gives us access to a lot of tools. So when in doubt, right-click. Besides markups, we can also make measurements. Let's go to our measurements function right here on the right. And before we measure, we need to calibrate our page. We need to make sure that our page is set to the same scale as the page itself. So in this case, you can see the scale down here. This is a 42 by 30 inch page. So let's calibrate our page in order to synchronize our scales. We can click on this calibrate tool right here. We need to select 2 points to calibrate. So it's very useful if your page comes with a predetermined dimension. This allows us to use that dimension and scale appropriately. This page luckily comes with this 30-foot dimension right here. So let's go to the intersection, find the correct snap, click, go to the next intersection, and click. The number in this box when you first calibrate will not say 30 feet or whatever dimension you just used. You need to input that yourself. So as long as you input the same number that you measured, you will calibrate perfectly. In this case, I've already calibrated this page, so 30 feet's already been input for me. I can store this scale in the page, allowing me to create further measurements and apply that scale to those measurements. And if I apply this scale to all my pages, then each page in this PDF set will get the same scale. In this case, I have 3 8.5 by 11 pages and this page here, so I only want to scale my first page. So we're not going to apply this scale to all pages. Once calibrated, we can test our calibration with a simple measurement. Let's click on our length tool and let's measure in the same spot. And there. Perfect. Our measurement's 30 feet, but it's a little hard to see. So let's move the measurement away so that we can see both dimensions at the same time. As I'm moving, you'll notice that I'm not able to move directly up from the measurement. And that's an issue because we want to keep our measurement along the same plane as the previous one. In order to circumvent this, all we need to do is press the Shift key on our keyboard, and now we can move our dimensions directly up, down, left, and right, just like ortho in most CAD programs. So I can now move this dimension up, let go of my cursor, and our dimension has been moved perfectly up and away from this dimension, maintaining the same plane, so it is still accurate. We can also use the area tool to measure areas. The polylength tool allows us to measure irregular shapes and perimeters. And If you don't see the tool that you're looking for, all you need to do is click on this arrow, and this will show hidden tools. You might see this arrow in numerous places next to different toolbars and tool sets. For example, there are many hidden tools up here and right up here. Let's go to our hidden tools and let's click on the count tool. This is one of my favorite tools. Let's say that we wanted to categorize all of our different vanity items in this bathroom. All we need to do is click on each item. Press escape when you're done, and let's click on our check. And if I go to properties, you'll notice that there's a lot of information that's here. I don't have to manually count the check marks. I can see how many checks I've placed by this number right here, and this will change depending on how many checks I've placed. You can also, just like markups, change the color and style of this measurement. So I can change the icon if I wanted to, etc. We hope you enjoyed this tutorial. To see more videos about Bluebeam Revu, please visit our website at ddscad.com. We hope you have a great day.